And I will, got it. I will say that the title of this session is The Value of Book Clubs for Students and Educators. And Rush Rogers is the one that submitted that, and she has people that will help her here tonight. But I think when I first saw that rush, I thought, yay, I've always wanted to be a part of a book club. I'll learn something. And I thought, could I have done that with my students when I was teaching? And the answer I said was, yes, I know I could have. So I know I'll learn some things, and I believe we all will. And with that, Rush, the screen is yours.
Well, thank you very much. I so benefit from book clubs and have always thought they had great value. So I work with Deborah Woolridge from Bowling Green, and she facilitates, choose the books, does the schedule for the book clubs for our state organization. And Joanne does the book club with her, the folks in her residential village. And so I've been blessed to participate in that as well. And so I thought, well, there are lots of reasons why the three of us got in. We've got lots of stories to tell you about why we think you might want to consider it or join us. Doesn't really matter. But and Nikisha, whom I don't think is on, is at Central State. So that was to try to get us around the state and ages and all of that. But I'm going to start first because I do want to address that issue about what is available for our children, our grandchildren, our schools, for youth. So I put it together in a sense that what could we do that is extensions to classrooms, and that most of mine were what we called the lunch bunch. Mm-hmm. And so we did Junior Great Books, which is a marvelous program. If you've touched it at any way along life's walk, it is marvelous. It's marvelous as adults. It's marvelous for kids. Takes classic literature and gets your social emotional development, gets Socratic discussions about real life situations. And then we did Battle of the Books, which might be a competition that's run through your ESC or some group that you're associated with. And in that one, they have like 13 books a year and a group of 5 or 7 kids, and they read them. And then if they do the competition, it's like an academic quiz bowl, right? Mm-hmm. So they get incredible breadth and depth for every one of these books. And it really did take some of those kids that are kind of outliers because they're reading different kinds of things, or they're interested in sci-fi or horror or whatever. And Battle of the Books prides itself on pulling new authors and all genres. So it did take one guy took a copy of every one of the books my first year. And I was like, well, that's crazy. You know, only can read one at a time. What is he doing? And every time we met at lunch to talk about a book, he'd say, I'm going to leave when you get to where I am. He was reading those books parallel. And I thought, oh my golly, these kids are just going to wear out with him. But they didn't really, because they understood that he could read, 11 or 13 books and keep them all in his head. And then, oh my golly, when he got to the competition, he was just wild and woolly. So that's an interesting book, or an interesting extension. And the third one was Ohio Future Problem Solving. I don't know if any of you have been involved with that, but that allows 4 bodies of research to be read and then applied to future problems. And it was an incredible extension. So there are at least 3 that you could do with a parent. I think I did the lunch bunch. I was a coordinator. There wasn't much happening at lunchtime, so I could facilitate those Junior Great Books and Battle of the Books over my lunch and never miss a step. And the teachers went with me when we did the competitions, but I think they just handed me those kids. I indicated who read, the kids and I had the discussions on breadth and depth. So the second group, and I think Joanne's going to jump in a little bit here. Did you have anything to add to that, Deborah?
No, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Joanne and I have some pieces, and you may have some pieces with this as well. The other thing that I would encourage you to take a look at is the next chapter book clubs. And these book clubs are for adults with disabilities. Okay. And this, I bet I've been doing this 5 or 6 years, because when they were first funding it, they said, who would not be put off by disabilities and read anything? And my name came up. So I did this, and it really has been amazing. They didn't want to take the books with them, so we read the books aloud together. Okay. So the outcome of that was just amazing in terms of their fluency, their ability to read along, their comprehension, their ability to contribute what they knew about that issue or that piece. It was just the 3 autistic guys. They read like this, da 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 da, right? And after a year, they were really reading. They were reading for meaning. So then they were reading in a way that gave you meaning, right? So it was really, really, really interesting. This group that I have right now, that's here in Columbus, I was doing it in Greenville. One of the guys, if they read the book I'm reading, then they offer me a book, right? So this guy gives me the book, It by Stephen King. And I'm telling you, I couldn't create that in my head to save my soul. And I'm about to give him the book back, right? 4 chapters in, I'm about to give him the book back. I said, man, I can't picture this. I can't construct this. The guy sitting next to me says, hey, Russia, I had that same trouble. Why don't you try that on an audio book? Because when you hear all those voices, it'll all make sense to you. And I went, well, now that's right. But I'm 76 years old. Had I thought of that? No, I thought it was all or nothing. I either read the hardback book or I didn't. And it's a genre, and Stephen King's very good at it. And I just was inexperienced. But the guy says to me, hey, Rush, you don't have to struggle. You can get this. Now, Deborah, do you have work group? Are there groups that work with you at Bowling Green that you have book clubs with?
I don't work with them, but I know about them. I'm kind of like on the fringe, but and it would probably happen at a lot of universities. The women's centers on campus usually have reading groups. They probably approach like feminist literature and get together at noon to do that. I know that one of the undergrads who is active with AAUW, she's in a specific book group that is not related to feminists, but they have different groups with different interests that will meet and read and talk. I think too, part of that is for the socialization and finding belonging on campus with like-minded other students. And then this past year with our community center, we have linked with the senior center. I'll talk about that later. With the women's center, and we're holding our discussions of the books that we have picked in the women's center, so we can get a bigger group of people, campus and community.
And I think that I think your social piece of it is really important. And I've said on more than one occasion, there are some books that I really embrace more when I have that opportunity to have that discussion with a diverse group of people. Then that book has a whole lot more meaning for me. I worked for a superintendent in Greenville, and he had the administrative team read the book, right? You read it on your own. And every 2 weeks, we met in the first 20 minutes of this administrative meeting. We discussed the chapter on that book. And it was amazing what it did for that particular leadership team. It kind of, you at least knew the language of and the conceptual base of, foundation of what he was trying to, the vision he was rolling out. It was a means that he rolled it out. Anybody else is there anybody in the group that participates in a book study at work? Or okay, Margaret, you want to share?
I've been in a book club for 20 years, and we started, I have one friend that started it. We actually named ourselves the Nia Book Club, has meaning and all of that. But I started and joined the book club because all I found that I was reading was related to teaching or my classroom books for my children. And this allowed me to read outside of education. But and I came on and signed up for this tonight because we're still meeting. We meet on Sundays now. We've still been doing Zoom, but before Zoom, we met once a month on a Sunday at that person's house that picked the book and usually served us dinner or whatever. But we haven't gotten back to that. For Christmas, though, we all got together and exchanged gifts and talked about our books. But I really came on tonight because I wanted to get some new ideas. We have great discussions because most of us are educators. Some are not, but they're professionals. And we have a great time socializing. It's almost like we've become one big family. If one have a problem, need to talk it out, we listen, we pray together. So in terms of socializing, it's been great. We've done all kinds of genres as well, reading. But I came on just to figure out and get some new ideas so I can take it back and report it on Sunday.
Well, I'm hoping we'll help you. I am. Joanne, do you want to talk about how it is at your village and your book club?
I live in a retirement center. So most of the people, well, there are some people who still have their cars. I have my car still, but most of the people do not drive very far away from the retirement center. Our members, we have anywhere from 14 to 20 who come once a month to the book club, and we call it the Book Look. And the oldest one is Madeline, who just turned 95. And the youngest one, I think, is one of the gals. I think she's 70. So we have a sort of diverse age level in there. We have homemakers. We have wives of professional men. We have professional wives who have men who've stayed home and to take care of their kids. I mean, we have all kinds of people who are in this group, and it's even Rush has gotten used to coming over and being a part of the group too. And they think she lives there, but she doesn't yet. And what I do is I go to the library and I get at least 14 copies of books, and I have to get at least half big print, large print, and half regular print. Then they have a month to read it in, and many of them give them back to me, so then I can pass them on to the next person, and that goes pretty well. And we over 3 years, 4 or 5 years. Well, we started in 2018, but we were out for COVID. Over the years, I think we've only lost one book in all of this. So the library has been very, very good to us, and I can go to the window, pick up the books, bring the books back to the window, and don't even have to go inside, and they have them ready to go for me as long as I call them in.
I think
every year at the end of the summer, I have everybody bring in a list of books that they have read that year, to suggest to put on the list for the following year. We've got one lady who is writing children's books and has had 2 of them published already.
Wow.
And some very interesting things that have happened, and I'll do that later.
Well, and I think the thing that's really valuable, back to Margaret's point, is these ladies and gentlemen have been everywhere. Okay. And so you really do get the picture. We read the woman from Troublesome Creek, or Bookwoman from Troublesome Creek. One guy had lived in those hollers and he gave us all the color, and another one knew everything about where the blue people were. So the thing that's very valuable about her group is that They really have been. So if you do something in World War II history and you're doing it about Paris, or they'll bring that book down there and show you that and that and that. And that's just down the street from that. And it's absolute magic. Absolute magic.
One of the books we read at the very beginning was The Return of the Enola Gay by Paul Tibbets, who was the person who flew the plane over Hiroshima, however you want to pronounce it. We had a Japanese lady living where she's passed away now. Mrs. Tanaka was her name. And she asked the other gal who started the book club with me if she could come to the meeting, but she didn't want to say anything. And we said, fine. So she sat in the middle of the table, and there were probably about 12 of us there at that time. And we talked about, we got into the book, and it tells about him getting ready and the crew getting ready to go over these places and how they dropped the bombs and so forth. And she seemed to get really restless at one point. And so Dorothy said, "Are you okay?" And she says, "Well, I have a question." And her question was, "Why did you bomb Japan? We did not know that we were in a war." She was about 15, 16 years of age at that time. She lived outside of Kobe with her family. They were totally stunned, supposedly, when this happened. She was a very intelligent lady. She was in the Cleveland Symphony for a long time, and she taught Suzuki. So I'm wondering if she didn't learn to play the violin from Suzuki himself in Japan. But this just put everybody back on their heels. This happened right in their country, and she didn't know anything about it. I mean, she wasn't a baby.
So I think what we've said here is that initially the benefits of this are, I'm going to just dive by myself, the accountability to read.
Right.
I do not meet in either one of either Deborah's or Joanne's place that I haven't finished that book, right? I mean, I might be interested in that book in passing, but if I'm going to get there and we're going to have a healthy talk about it, I get that read. And right. As I said a moment ago, those diverse perspectives, like Joanne was saying there, they're valuable. We don't always think about, we've read several books. This is back to your reading, or to your teaching, but we've read books about various cultures. Okay. And so understanding that and what that student's experience might be and what the rituals might be is huge. And the discussion in a time when I think we're all looking for civil discussions, civil discourse, those communication skills, when we say, well, you know that was this, and this was the time, and this is how people looked at it, that whole communication skill of wanting to be clear and want to connect this and wanting to understand the social connections we've talked about. We've learned a whole lot of information on a whole lot of topics. Deborah's going to solve the problems of Israel and Palestine in the next, here in February. And I can hardly wait. And we create a connection with one another and a sense of community. I think that's what Deborah was talking about the ones that are there. And I don't want to put words in your mouth.
That's okay,
Deborah. Don't let me put my words in your. But that whole sense of being connected and having that community that really wants to understand the topics and the conflicts and is really important. So I can say that Deborah has taken me more than just on Israel and Palestine, outside my comfort zone, to genres that I haven't thought about or topics that I haven't thought about. And I think that's a benefit for us. Some of us are just hungry to know that, right?
Yes.
Now, I'm older than some of you, so I'll tell you that.
Not quite.
Not right.
There is research to say that belonging to a book club can help you live longer. Keeps your brain sharp, reduces your stress, boosts your creativity, increases your confidence, and really that it's a key to transition from work to retirement. So, I mean, there's a real reason why when my doctor, I go every 6 months, my doctor asks me, what are your connections? And she counts these book clubs as connections. She said, I can get that time right on the clock, or I can tell her those 3 words. But it tells her a whole lot more about our connections.
Mhm.
Where we are, it's a wonderful way for new people moving into the development to get acquainted with 3 or 4 people. Usually they know the people who live around them in their apartments, but this gives them a chance to get acquainted with other people and on a one person to person basis and discuss with you and talk with each other. And so it's a really good way to break into a new community too.
Um,
I think that's a key. That's what I think Deborah was saying about a bridge of coming into BGSG's community, finding a place where I belong and I'm seen and I'm heard. I think the same thing when you're talking about adults with disability is you want connections, you want friendship, you want community engagement. You want people to improve their ability to listen to one another and to share out books. And I think Joanne probably has. Do you? I don't know whether you do or not, Deborah. Have a person or two who may have some disability that's apparent or not apparent. I know Joanne has had to find for people who don't see well, even the large print books aren't enough. But I think that's kind of what we're saying is a value of the book clubs and finding a book club. How do they share them, Deborah? If I came to Bowling Green, which I might do Reagan's graduation or something you do, if I come there, how do I find these book clubs?
Well, we do advertise on campus, and on websites. After we talked about doing this, I thought about one of the things we do with the community and I thought, you know what, this is a type of book club. The Great Decisions.
Yes.
Okay. So
I hope you were going to go there. Thank you.
Okay. So this has been going on in BG for over 20 years, I'm sure, before I ever moved here. And we partner with the Senior Center, and they do the advertising. They put the things together. We meet there. But my role and one of the other members' role is what we do is we find the speakers. And so I have a group of university professors that are in history or political science or different areas of study, like international studies, that I put out the topics and I go, hey, does anybody want to do one of these? And they usually get back to me within a week and we'll fill up 6 of the 8 topics because we just go for 6 weeks. And if you haven't participated, it's about international issues, political, what's happening in the world. And the people that come, that can buy the book, which it's more like, it looks like a magazine, but it's just a compilation of the 8 topics and writers write on those topics.
Mm-hmm.
So I think why university faculty members like to participate is that they get there and there's usually we have about 40 to 60 community members show up on Saturday morning for it. And they've read the information. They're active in current affairs and the news. They know what's going on historically and currently. And so it's a little different environment than teaching 18-year-olds in the classroom. So they enjoy it because it lasts for an hour and a half, but they might speak 30 minutes or 45 minutes on the topic. And then the rest of the time is this Q&A. And the Q&A can go on for 45 minutes.
Oh, I bet.
And it's very civil discourse. Last week, there was a couple of people that got kind of rowdy. We had to like comment, tell them that's not our topic. We're not talking about that today. But it's an example of civil discourse, because I'm sure not everybody has the same political views in that room, but they're all there to talk about the issue, maybe get a new perspective. And it's really a type of book group that you're reading an article that's within a book and then discussing that. So I have found that very, I don't know, I'm there, we're helping with it. And I find it very encouraging that the community can come together like that and have a civil discourse about hot topics politically, internationally. So I think that's something that could happen if it's happening in your community. You could get, involved as a partner or whatever. But the other thing, when we look at what we've done with the adults, the state, we have the state one, and then some of us have branch ones. Book discussions. I can't remember when we started this, Joanne. I think I kind of evolved it when we were talking about cocktails and convos or something.
A long time ago.
And I'm like, well, we're just not going to meet for cocktails, let's tie a book to it. And then we can talk about the issue, but also we have something to back up what we're talking about. So sometimes we have cocktails and convos. Sometimes we have coffee and convos. This year we're doing lunch and convos. We kind of move it around to see what time works at that point for people. But I think the exciting thing for that, we pick themes, read about issues related to women, or disabilities, or just some historical stuff. But this year we're doing some pretty weird, I consider them kind of strange books, because I'm working with a group of people that are 40 or younger. Okay. So we're trying to, I'm open. Let's, what do you guys want to read about? So they picked some different kinds of books. Some are advocacy. A couple are with the word witch in the title or hag. But once you get into it, you realize that it's really about women advocating for women from the early days when they were called witches, but maybe they were midwives, or they were using plant based healing. And
we had that cyborg one that I
Yes,
took
we
a
did.
cover of that book and I thought, I've lost my mind. I can't even carry it without a cover out of my house. And but when I got in, I was like, golly, thank you for throwing that in there. I would have missed it completely. That whole evolution of Barbie and women in art and all kinds of, it was a fabulous step out.
John led that one, I think. But I've been open to it. And I think what has been fascinating, with the last book, it was really looking at why have women been persecuted? Why did they call women witches? Why, those kinds of persecutions that went on. And what evolved from that discussion was we all were like, you know what? We need to start a community group. We need to bring like-minded women that may look at alternative kinds of health practices together and see how we can create a support system for women in our community who may need some help. So we're still working on that. I'm trying to push the people I'm working with because they're all under 40. They have kids. They're super busy. You know, I went right out and I go, oh, I'll talk to like these 5 people, and I already have them on board. I'm like, okay, people, come on. We need to move on this.
Yeah,
But
we need to go to move to action.
yeah, but I'm just trying to be really slow, and because I don't want to be the one that has to do it. I mean, I will, but I'm trying to turn things over to the younger generation.
I'm going to jump in here while you're taking a thought, because I think one of the things, if you're doing a book club and you're going to your next step, is one of the things that Deborah brings to any discussion is the historical perspective, right? I threw out a book about the Ku Klux Klan, and we read it. It was I thought a fascinating book, but it had a whole lot more meaning once Deborah gave the historical perspective and the geopolitical part of the Ku Klux Klan. So if you have people who in your group, as I said, that there were people in Joanne's group who have a certain interest in that particular, she provides a lot of background when we read on Indigenous women and whether it's braiding sweetgrass or what was the last one, the firekeeper's daughter. That understanding the Indian culture and what those rituals are and what coming of age looks like is really, really helpful. So if there's somebody that really thinks that way or has that kind of experience, that kind of Deborah provides, and so do some of the players in Joanne's group, a context for the discussion of the book. So that might be pretty helpful. Now, they did push us on the state book club not to have them all be too heavy.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so we did have to take a look at not just taking a wide variety of topics or of genre, but to try to have that book that gave you all the facts, like Israel and Palestine, to braiding sweetgrass, which compares the science of the indigenous people, what they did and the rituals and why, and what contrasts that, interfaces that with the with science on, like traditional science.
And another book to put in that category too, Rush, is oh shoot, I just had it here. The Girl Who Wrote in Silk.
Yes, yes, yes.
By Kelly Estes. That is a fantastic one too. And this year, I asked people to bring them at the beginning, at the end of the year. I asked for, we begin in September. So at the August meeting, I have people bring me 3 ideas of books they have read during the last year that they would like to put on the list for us all to discuss. And so then when I pick some books like that, I've got another person who has read it thoroughly and can help with the discourse, when you're talking, about this. One of the ones we read this year that was a fantastic book, me being a musician, the Violin Conspiracy. If you have not read that, that is a wonderful, wonderful book. So, but
and Deborah asks people at the state level to contribute titles, and then she puts them together in this marvelous order and whatever. And so you are getting different perspectives right off. I meet with my group in September, and they all share their top 3 books from the summer read, right? And I put that list together, and then we kind of work off of it. And so the way you get your book is really pretty open. I found that I was a little bit like Margaret was discussing, and that is that most of the books I read were professional, right? They were teaching books. And so getting out and looking at what that might look like in the hollers of Troublesome Creek, or where that might look like on the island with the firekeeper's daughter, it made me kind of shift from that idea of teaching to that idea of seeing the students differently. And that's been a kind of a helpful piece for me. Did anybody else have something they want to share in there? Deborah, did I
think
cut you
Hannah
off?
had her hand up.
Nope.
I'm
You're good.
sorry. Who had their hand up?
Hannah, I thought.
Yeah, I wanted to know, you keep saying the state level. What do you mean by the state level?
Well, the way that Deborah and I met is that AAUW Ohio
Ah,
has a
okay.
state book club. I don't misunderstand. I would definitely put before on the Friday night before Delta Kappa Gamma state conference a book discussion. I don't have any kind of a meeting that I don't have the book that I think lies to that, and I twist about 3 people's arms and say, I want you to be sure you've read this book and let's talk about it to kind of frame the thing. But Deborah heads AAUW's book club.
Okay.
and local branches of DKG and or AAUW have book clubs.
Well, my sorority has a book club too. In fact, I was doing mine and then the sorority, and it got to be a little bit too much. But we kind of took a break, and we're starting back in March. And I'm going, because if I start a book, if you give me the title, I will finish that book. I'm
Yep,
gonna.
I think that-
I don't.
I said that I think it holds us accountable. Now, what I have done this year, and I will share that in direct response to what you're saying, I've gotten more comfortable with people not having gotten the book from the library yet.
A lot of people use the Kindle in my club, book club. They use the Kindle, but I like the book. I
do
like the
too.
book in my hand,
But-
and that's just the way I am.
Well, sometimes people participate in our book shares, our book conversations that have not yet read the book.
True.
And I've gotten, because they're getting it from the library, let's keep it real. If they don't have the money to buy the book, then we're waiting on it. But I don't think that's at all wasted, because the discussion and the clarifying questions, then when that book comes to them from the library, they're going to be ready. So
Right.
I'm not the purist I used to be. I know Joanne gets to the book club some months and hadn't finished the books. And I don't
But they
worry
still
about that
come and-
because
they still come and discuss, as much as they've read, and I let them keep them, after I'm supposed to turn them in
Mhm.
to finish the book if they want to. Another one that came up in my head, where was it? The sweetness at the bottom. What is that? What sweetness at the bottom of the pie? If you have not read that one, that is hysterical, by Alan Bradley. So we have funny ones. We have once a year, I will pick a part of the library and say, pick a book from this section,
genre,
like science fiction books. Pick a book
Uh-huh.
from that and discuss that
Mhm.
one, or a
Mhm.
mystery book, or this. What I'm trying to do is to get them to know where things are in the library that we have, because we don't have a card count. Bite your tongue. I do not want to type up cards for a card type for a card.
you
Yeah.
knew I was coming. You saw me coming.
I know.
I would keep you off the street if you went together and put that sheet together. So I hope, did I cut you off, Deborah? You ready?
Go ahead.
Okay, so I think we've talked here about how we could find a book club. I think we've talked about how we can join one or create one, find 3 friends and start. And I think we've talked to some degree about how you can find the books, whether that's a theme of your sorority or the theme of your group. I think I would still advise you to keep moving out, pushing the parameters of the things you're reading, just so you expand everybody's horizons. I did go one summer solely because I thought we might be going. I like to hold a book. We might be going to a time when a lot of things were either audio books or Audible or whatever. So I took 3 months, and the books we did were Audible books. just to get people comfortable with the idea that that might be what the library got to us, or that might be where we read, whether it was Kindle or Audible or whatever. And I thought we just ought to experience that. How do I, if I'm really a visual learner, how do I wrap my arms around an Audible book, right? Or an audio book? And so, just in case you're looking for a break, a chance, an expansion, I want to encourage you to at least embrace for a period of time that whole idea of listening to books.
I have several members in my book club that do listen to the books.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
And I often say, just as an example, I believe, and just finished the book, Let Them Theory by Mel Robbins. And the Audible book was absolutely fascinating because she did it.
Mm.
That
Mhm.
Atlas of the Heart, which is all the stuff on emotions and the 27 motions that Brene Brown did. Hearing her read you that book is like almost heaven. And so sometimes I think that I will say to somebody, this is a book that I think you probably will want to own. But if I can encourage you, I believe it will go right to your sweet, sweet spirit if you listen to the Audible, right? So I do try in places where I am to not discount the idea that
Ask if we would go over and let Blue out a couple times and maybe even watch a TV show or something.
when I
I
did
was going to
Go ahead.
say,
sorry,
I belong to 3 book clubs. Well, really 4, I guess. I have the Minerva Book
Donna.
Club,
That's a lot.
which is a literary book club, and then our library has a fiction book club and a nonfiction book club, and then I belong to the OSU book club. So, but they're reading different things, and often they are books that I would never have picked up.
absolutely.
That's to me is a big advantage of a book fair or a book club, is that if I wouldn't have picked it out on my own. Exactly.
Absolutely.
Second thing, you were talking about audiobooks. I think there is a excellent place for one. But if I do an audiobook, I usually use fiction. When I'm
Okay.
using a nonfiction book, a lot of times I'm taking notes as I'm going along.
Right.
I have a little post-it in the book and adding to it.
Mhm.
So that's the advantage of that. The OSU book clubs are usually ones that are research based.
Uh-huh.
And again, I would never have picked it up on my own, but we have really learned a great deal. So those are, I hope I didn't repeat somebody else's
Oh,
topics.
no.
It took me a while to get in. I had all kinds of problems. So,
I'm sorry.
well, it wasn't anybody else's problem. It was my computer didn't want to behave itself tonight. So that was the,
Well, I think that point is very well taken. That you said, well, why would you belong to multiple book clubs? Because they have a very different focus. Like I participate Bexley's Library. This is their 100th year. So they are bringing in a lot of local authors. And so there's this talk. You get the book before, right, when you register, and then the author and whomever's interviewing them does a whale of a job. Like you said, John, these are books that, honest to John, if I had a cup of coffee and I sat in a bookstore, I wouldn't buy that book. Not that Cyborgs one either, right? But boy, when I get it, I'm like, yeah. So I understand exactly why you do that.
also, I heard somebody talking about a book search. I don't know if anybody's near Findlay, Ohio, but our Mazza library, our Mazza gallery always has a book search, and it can be on various levels. Because we have like from 3rd grade on up, basically could do a book search. And that those are another thing that is available to anyone, and it's free. You just gotta show up, But Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays afternoon, and Sundays afternoon. So I'll
Oh,
do
okay.
an advertisement there, so.
I do appreciate that. My granddaughter's they're at Finley, and I never have linked her up to that or her me. So I
Oh,
appreciate.
you must go.
Oh, yeah, you have to go. It's pretty fabulous. Mhm.
I'm a docent there
Yeah.
and we do, we have done up to 100, over 100 tours a year for
Mhm.
school groups and that kind of thing. And other, we've done a couple of times our own chapter and yeah.
Mhm.
And
It's
the
a,
year that I was state president, that's where our biennial seminar was. And Beth was there and took care of us too. So it's a great place to visit. It's not just for children.
yeah, it's a
Hey,
hidden
thank you.
treasure. Yeah, it's a hidden treasure. Yeah, it's pretty fabulous.
Thank you.
I think somebody made a point that you can be in a lot of different book groups, but I think sometimes people have to find the right book group to be part of. My sister-in-law, who does not live here, she lives in another state, but she knows, oh, she's in a book group. So she'll call me and go, oh, there's a book group I'm going to go to. I'm like, good. And it's at her school. She teaches elementary. And then she comes back from it and she's so disappointed because
Oh.
it was more like reading romance novels or something. And that's not what she wanted. I said, no, yeah, I get it. You don't feel comfortable there. You don't feel comfortable with those books. So, and
If you're
then,
looking for community and belonging, that I mean, to tell yourself it's not about the book,
right,
it's about the belonging and it's about the community and it's about the conversation. You have to give yourself permission for that. I mean, you can be in the right group and this particular book isn't, your cup of tea, but that's very different than this group is not my
right,
group.
yeah. I could have told, when she started talking, I knew. And I had like bought that Matthew McConaughey book
Yes,
for,
Green Light.
yeah, for all the men in my family for Christmas a couple of years ago. So then my sister goes out and she gets it on tape. Okay. And she listens to it in her car. And I'm like, oh, I didn't know she was going to do that because I knew it was going to be shocking to her. And I said, you should have read the book, not listened to it on tape. And she goes, I figured that out after I listened to it. But I was like, oh my gosh, I need to move to Oklahoma so I can help her. But I think that's what she's waiting for. Come to Oklahoma and start a book club or whatever. But yeah, I think people have to pick out, do they want to do a book on tape? Do they want to read it? What's going to be the best genre for them? And also, do you want to watch a movie that's about the book you're going to read, or you want to read the book first and then look at the movie? There's different ways to
I
approach
very much did.
content. Yeah.
I
Go
very
ahead.
much did when I started with the adults with disabilities. We read the book and then we watched the movie.
That's
And
how we've done it.
it was hilarious because they'd say to me, hey, Rogers, that didn't happen in the book. Or they'll say, Rogers, where's the whatever that did happen in the book, right? So I knew they had the book
Right.
because that was kind of our check. But I think there were some, like it maybe, that I ought to see clips of to get the lay of
You
the
should see the movie and then read the book, maybe on that one.
that might have been the one that you watched the movie first. Okay, are there any comments or questions or anything here? I'm counting on you to have some input of what we can give you.
I belong to a book club. Well, we have quite a few here in Shelby County. And our group, what we typically do is we have 10 members now. We've lost a few over the last couple of years. Each member they give it to me and then I compile a list, but they suggest 2 or 3 books, like in March. And then in April when we meet, we go through them and I give them the review, brief synopsis. I tell them how much it'll cost, at Amazon or wherever. And we give them how they're ranked on Amazon, Goodreads and such. And then we vote on our books. Our book club reads 10 throughout the year, and we have a whole gamut, but it's based on, we vote on which ones we want. And it was interesting last year when we were selecting our books, the number one choice, everybody had picked it, was the women. Because
Oh,
most of us in our group were either in high school or in college during the Vietnam War. But that was our number one choice last year.
Oh,
I think the women, I know it's a long, long book, but it is a fast read, believe it or not.
Right.
But I think that is a book that everybody should read. I mean, no matter what age. So often in high schools and even in colleges, very little is taught about the Vietnam War
Oh,
and the need to know that information. And it's so essential, especially in these days, about women's rights.
Hmm.
You
Oh,
know,
and the
that
idea.
era was a huge change in the way the laws changed for women. Before Vietnam, women couldn't get their credit cards in their own names, or they couldn't get bank loans. That was the period that time changed.
And I thought it was so important that it talked about the time of their service. It talked about their coming home and struggling alone, and then how the women took care of other women. I just thought,
yes.
and then one of Joanne's ladies, after I suggested that I thought it was a good book, she walks up and said, "Have you read Goodnight, Irene?" I said, "No." And she said, "You got to go get it, Rush. Go get it. It's a must. It's a quick and dirty read." It was the counterbalance of the women, because it was the Red Cross donut ladies. And the same kind of timeline about what they thought they were doing in their service. They're coming home. They're taking care of each other. It's another very, very, one is, this big and the other one's this big. But because I read women first, Goodnight, Irene was just, but I think the voting's a good idea. I do.
I like that idea, but like I said, we, as the host, you have a choice of picking out what you want us to read.
There you go. Okay.
And we've already composed our list for 10 months. We try to take the summer off, but we've already composed our list for this year. Like I'm
Our
hosting.
host is typically the person whoever, when we vote on the books, we have the name of the person that suggested that book, and then they're the hostess for that month.
Right.
That when we
Good
read
idea.
it.
Mhm.
Good idea. Anybody else? Ideas for us here? Joanne?
Well, this is kind of a unique situation, and we've got a lot of people here who haven't been reading for a long time because of their jobs and so forth. And so it's getting them back into, we have both men and women, and sometimes that's a little more difficult to pick a book that is going to be, acceptable by both, because the men are just as vocal as the women are in this group that speak out. So it's a nice mix, and it's a nice way for new people to get into the community and get to know some people on a a small register of people, rather than the whole bunch of people coming up and saying, "Well, hello, welcome to the group. I'm so and so. I'm so and so. I'm so and so." This type of thing. So it's been well attended, and I think it'll keep going. My only problem is that when I go to the library, I have to have a copy that's going to give me 14 books. So it has to be something. I can't go back too far in history, in time, because they didn't have that many books then, or they didn't have large print books then. So that makes it a little more difficult.
I had to go out and buy West with Giraffes. 14.
That was a wonderful book.
Because the library said we can't do that. I said, well, I can. So I went to my local independent store and said, hey, I need this many large prints and this many. I said, well, Rush, when you go to those large prints, it's going to take longer. I don't care. I want them to be able to read West with Giraffes.
Oh, that's great. That's our book next week. I
Oh, you will
loved
like, oh,
it.
it's a wonderful book.
And I don't even know. It might have been one of my grandkids that said, "Oh, Granny, this is it." And I thought, "Oh, it really is." And we should be able to remember when there wasn't a zoo and all of that. It's fabulous, fabulous. Anybody else?
I had one idea.
Okay.
Here a while back, well, several years, well, 2 or 3 years ago, we had the speaker that's the librarian for the Library of Congress.
Uh-huh.
And one of the things, she came out with her mother, believe it or not. She was a breakfast speaker, highly, I think her name's Claudia something. Anyway, wonderful gal. Anyway, she made a point. She said, don't waste your time reading a book you don't like. You don't have to finish every book. And if it turns you off and you're not interested, don't read it. But that doesn't mean you can't contribute to the conversation about
Right.
it.
Right.
And so that was one thing she stressed, was that time's too short to waste your time reading a book you don't like. So
Do you know one of the things, just as a sidebar to that, is that there was something I read very recently that said kids in their classes read too fast, skimmed, often didn't read the whole book. And so it's really, if we aren't careful in sharing these books and these strategies and these discussions, they're going to have incomplete holes because they don't understand why you would read.
and I'm going to piggyback on what you said also. I've
Okay.
taught at various levels from preschool through graduate school. So reading aloud is probably the most important thing needs to be done in classrooms every day, because some people feel that they're stressed and they don't have time to do it. But it's the rhythm of the language and the pacing of the language and the stress of individual words that are so important, because the way you say professionalism, you know that's an important word, and you know that it's a standard, even if you don't know exactly what it means. And for example, Charlotte's Web is a wonderful book, but it shouldn't be read with young kids, because the vocabulary is just a little bit above first and second graders. They need to have some understanding of the language that's there. And people need to know that the comma when a comma is put in a book, in a sentence, there's a reason why that comma is there. And if you're scanning it, you miss the meaning of the comma.
Well, that's absolute. My dad, the more the blinder he got, the more my mother read the contemporary books, the bestsellers aloud at night in the living room. And we all were blessed by these books that were contemporary, probably over our head. But you heard all that inflection. You got all that meaning when somebody was angry. You know, I do think that we don't even always read to older kids, but I think it's equally valuable when you look at vocabulary and you look at the whole meaning of the way I deliver that sentence or that paragraph or that point. I think you're so well that, but I thought everybody did that, right? I didn't realize it was because my dad didn't see that my mom was reading to him so he could talk about anything when he was out and about. But that is so important. And that's one of the reasons when we started with the book club with adults with disabilities, we read it aloud. But they couldn't like read a sentence. They had to read a chapter, or they had to end at a place in the story. You know, I wouldn't let them stop with me on a cliff. I said, "Oh, no. I'm not waiting a week to find out what happens here. You're going to stay here 2 more minutes." But to get that idea that we're really, so maybe that's why the kids said to me, "Hey, Rush, get an audio book, because if you hear that voices, you'll understand that book." You know, is maybe what we go. Anybody else?
when you use audiobooks too, you can also include adults here anyway. We can include adults who cannot read any longer, either because of their eyesight or not being able to get a hold of books. And so that includes them too, which is important, I think.
Oh, that's another thing I was going to say, Joanne. A lot of times I download a book, even though I have the hard copy.
Mhm.
I have a lot of doctor's appointments. I don't want to drag a book along with me. So I
Gotcha.
like to have it on my phone, and I get it downloaded with Libby, which is there's no cost on Libby,
Right?
and I bring it with me. And that way I always have a book with me, and I don't have the weight of, for example, when I read The Women, I couldn't stand it or
It's heavy.
sit and hold that book. I
Right.
had to either read it at a table,
Mhm.
because it
Yes.
was physically heavy to carry around. And so I think that's another important point, Joanne, is that that's another advantage, if not for a recorded book, but for a book on.
My brother and I'm 76, like I said. My brother and I have gotten to about 500 pages is about what he and I can hold and read and get into. And after that, like somebody, I forget the one that really jumped it, but they had done so much research that the appendices was the size of a real book. So that book was just too heavy. So then
Well, if you've tried to read The Covenant of Water by Verghese, you understand that is a huge book.
Yes, it is.
Either large print or regular print is still huge. So,
well, I want to honor your time. So I have a PowerPoint I can upload. I think you can find me if you have any questions. You can find Deborah. She's a member at Bowling Green. Joanne's, but we're happy to continue this conversation or respond to you in any way that you would find helpful. But thank you for thinking about it with me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Informative.
Very good. Keep reading.
Yes, keep reading.
Amen.
And when we see you at Deer Creek, we will pass it. Each of us will have a book to share.
Yeah. Oh, that
That's
sounds,
the title we're thinking about.
sounds
think
like a
that-
plan.
That's a good idea. I did just while I'm thinking about that before she shuts us off. I do advise some of the people in Joanne's group to use and my own handicap to use an index card, because sometimes you lose track of who's who. Like that old joke, I don't know who's playing what position without but I do encourage them to use an index card as a bookmark, and that way they can keep track of who's whom if it flips back from this time to that time to this time, or this character to that. I said, it's not cheating. You're just holding the ideas while they jump around by however that author writes. Jodi Picoult's one that flips.
Yes, yes.
So I do encourage them to use an index card, and some of my disabled, I write on them for them, but that's neither here nor there. So
Our
you.
next book is Mad Honey by Jodi
Oh,
Picoult.
You'll really like that one.
I've read that. I've read that.
Yep.
That's what I'm hearing from everybody I've said that to. Somebody turned that one in as a section, because the first time we meet, and we usually don't meet in August, and then when we meet in September, they bring with them 3 ideas of books that they've read last year that we have not read. It goes on to my list so that I have a list to use when I call the library and he says, "Oh, I'm sorry, I only have 2 copies," or I've got 20, but they're already out, or something like this. Then I've got a resource, of getting books for the
You
next
won't
time
see
around.
the ending coming.
You
Oh,
won't. Mm-mm.
That's what everybody says. Don't say anything.
Oh,
No,
I'm
I'm just
I'm
saying you
not
won't
gonna.
see the end.
Don't
I don't want to